Recording in progress.
Good evening. It's Tuesday, August 20th, 2024, 6:30 p.m. Call to order the City of Franklin Common Council meeting. Madam Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Nelson.
Here.
Alderman Pecorelli.
Here.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Here.
Alderman Hassan.
Here.
Alderwoman Day.
Here.
Alderman Barber.
Here.
Alderman Craig.
Here. Excellent. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving right along onto B, citizen comment period. Any citizen wishing to speak at this time, please approach the podium. State your name and address for the record. 3 minutes is the maximum. I'll be keeping score up here for the time. It is now open. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor. My name is Paul Rotzenberg. I live at 6713 West River Point Drive here in Franklin. Been a resident of the community since 1989, so I've been around a little while. And some of you may not realize this, but 2 years ago I retired as the treasurer and finance director of finance for the community, serving in that position for nearly 10 years. Before you this evening, you have an agenda item considering the public water supply, and I'd like to address that this evening. I believe this might be the most consequential decision you will make as alderman in this term. It is a 40-year agreement. It talks about the acquisition of water from the city of Oak Creek. Franklin currently has some of the highest cost water in the state for communities of our size. This subject matter has been considered by staff for nearly 10 years. We've been looking at this particular subject matter. And again, it's probably the most consequential decision you will make. So please consider it carefully. All of your discussions, or the majority of your discussions on this matter, have been conducted in closed session. So the community has not heard what you've had to say about it. We don't even know what items and analysis you've considered because you haven't shared that with us. I think that's a mistake on your part, and I would urge you to look at the analysis very carefully. I'd urge you to have some discussions in open session so we as your community can hear what you have to say and what you're considering when you're making this decision. Back in March of 2018, there was a joint session with the Board of Water Commissioners to discuss this matter. Most of you were not here at that time. I believe the mayor was, and I believe Alderman Barber was, but many of you other were never part of that discussion. Staff hired and spent tens of thousands of dollars with financial and other consultants looking at alternatives, not just the city of Oak Creek, but the city of Milwaukee as a potential supplier. Again, Franklin currently has some of the highest cost water in the state. Franklin successfully challenged two $30 million construction contracts that Oak Creek wanted, which would have raised Franklin's rates even higher. I read part of the agreement that's before you this evening, and you're waiving your right to challenge the next construction contract. Why would you do that when that's going to burden your community with tens of millions of dollars of additional cost? Again, where is the analysis? It was not attached to the council agenda item. We as the public have not seen what you're considering. We have not heard how you've discussed and considered this matter. I urge you this evening to delay your decision. You could table it. That doesn't send too bad a message to Oak Creek. You certainly don't want to reject it, but you could table it, get additional analysis, have your discussion in open session, let us hear what you have to say about it, and then make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Good evening, Dana Gint, 9011 West Hawthorne Lane.
I have a couple comments and questions. The workshop that was held prior to the Planning Commission meeting for the UDO rewrite, I'd really like if that was actually an open session, that'd be an interactive thing, and people to be able to ask questions and discuss things with the city and the task force and citizens, and it'd be an open discussion. Not, the consultant doesn't need there doesn't need to be money involved. It just needs to be an open meeting. So I'm asking for that to be accomplished quickly, obviously. And then the other thing is that during that meeting, it was discussed that there was numerous complaints on August 3rd from the Rock Sports, from citizens regarding the Rock Sports Complex. And the police acknowledged that they did not take any measurements during that whole 5-hour period that was obnoxiously loud. So that's very concerning to me that they were relying on the noise monitors. And I went and watched the noise monitor. Actually, I was looking at the noise monitor while I was listening to Shania Twain word for word at my house, and the noise monitor was showing nothing. So that's very concerning. The monitors need to be moved. They're not in the appropriate locations. And this ties into the whole assessment thing regarding noise. The survey report for 2023 indicates that there are 105 noise complaints, and that's just for the online complaints. That does not include the police reports. So it's very concerning to me that in the past, the assessors have not really acknowledged or considered the noise nuisance. I do have some emails that they have acknowledged it, that it says July 20th, I have an email. Franklin continues to review the value of homes due to the rock noise pollution in your neighborhood. August, it says the City of Franklin Administration Common Council has received numerous concerns from homeowners living near the Rock Sports Complex concerning noise problems. The city is an ongoing concern for review. So obviously that's an externality that needs to be examined. And noise, there's different kinds of noise. The Milwaukee County Sound Study indicates that there's certain types of noise that tend to be more annoying to people and harmful. That includes sounds from speech and music. Many of the rock events, including concerts, baseball games, Hills Has Eyes, include speech and music, which are these that should have a 5 decibel penalty, according to the Milwaukee County Sound Study. So I'm looking for the assessor to acknowledge that there's externalities regarding this noise pollution. This isn't some community-sponsored event, parade, or anything like that. This is a commercial operated facility that has dozens, if not hundreds of events that are heard for miles. The Milwaukee County Sound Study even acknowledges that the noise is heard for 2 miles. I can read this paragraph. The rock monitoring study documented various activities at the rock which are clearly capable as a result of their volume and nature to annoy, irritate, and disrupt the quiet enjoyment and disturb the sleep of residents of Franklin and Greendale, neighborhoods adjacent to the rock, both during the daytime and nighttime hours. Some of these activities have produced noise that is clearly audible for as far as 2 miles away. So obviously the assessor, I'd like to know what they're going to do about evaluating the impact of this development that was put next to neighbors' homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Anyone else wishing to speak? Going once, say no one. Close citizen comment period. Moving on to letter C, approval of minutes, regular common council meeting of August 6, 2024. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second by Alderwoman Eichmann. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Organizational, mayoral and aldermanic appointments, we'll take these both together unless somebody wants separate action. Number 1, Carl Budnick, 7642 West Norwood Lane, Alderman D1, Civic Celebrations, 3-year unexpired term, expiring June 30th, 2027. And number 2, Alderman Hassan, appointment of Edward Ping, 4811 West Madison Avenue, Alderman District 3, Corps of Monitoring Committee, 3-year unexpired term, expiring May 31st, 2026.
Move to approve. Second.
First with Hassan, second by Barber. Roll call, please.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichmann.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
Excellent, 6 ayes, no noes, motion carries. Under F, there are no letters. G1. Informational Council update from city assessors, forward appraisal. We're going to have them come to the front, please. Yeah, we have. There you go. Just everyone's got their own microphone. And just for the record, for both of you, just state your name and business address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Nicole Tesh. Nicole Tesh with Forward Appraisal, Address is P.O. Box 13434, Green Bay, Wisconsin.
My name is Scott Elvey with Board Appraisal, same address.
Thank you and good evening. So, Madam Director, are you going to steer the ship on this one, or are you just going to go into the fun of the Q&A and the challenges?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit. I did provide just a quick printout kind of summarizing where we're at on this project. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You guys can obviously take this and read it as well. But some of the highlights, basically with us starting in March, the biggest thing that we had to focus on was things that we could do in the absence of that converted data from the prior assessor. So a lot of what we did
Let's
was,
stop you for a second.
Yeah.
Could you move that closer to you, or is it working? Can everybody hear?
I don't think it's on.
hello?
There you go. Yeah, just bring it a
closer.
little closer,
All right.
please.
No problem. So a lot of what we started with was cleaning up ownership information, which was well behind. I think the prior assessor maybe stopped in June of 2023. We had found plenty of stuff that showed it was even earlier than that. So we went back through 2022 records from the county to update ownership, to update changes. Looking back at, I think when we first started, there were several excessive tax claims from the prior year. So we tried to help get further information on those and figure out how those need to be processed, whether they were legitimate or not. Other stuff that we worked on was, let's see here, property owner requested reviews. So there were some that carried over that they had requested of the prior assessor. We just kind of took the lead on that and followed up with them. And then, in the last couple of months, we've just been doing a lot of heavy field work. We finally were able to schedule a lot of appointments for sale reviews, for permit work from the last year. All of the commercial properties have been visited. We've had to go to every single one of them just because of the data that wasn't there from the prior assessment information. See another one on here. We did send a lot of letters. There were a lot of letters sent out for sales, for permits, and then for income and expenses, which is something we ask of commercial property owners as well. Let's see here. As far as, completed work that is kind of note here is the software that we use is called Market Drive, and they were mostly complete with the conversion mid-July. So that was turned over to us in the middle of July. We really couldn't do any data entry prior to that. So that's why we went all of the field work we could possibly get done beforehand. Now we're heavy into inputting that information. And I think the only thing left, I'll touch on it a little bit later, just a few things left that they need to import, but they are not imperative that we have them right now. So we're kind of shifting our focus. Let's see here. As far as valuation is concerned, we have reviewed all of the sales from last year, both land and improved. We have validated all of those sales. We've created new neighborhood delineations, which was something that was seriously needed because I think they had over 100 neighborhoods, which for a city this size is ridiculous. So we've gone through all of that. We've looked at land sales. We've modeled the land valuations. We've modeled improvements, and we're kind of just reviewing those now and just making sure that those fit and that our models produce values that are representative of market. Let's see here.
I'm big on the discovered issues. If you want to really touch on
Sure,
the discovered landmines that you.
And I pretty much highlighted the stuff I thought was most important, but as far as the issues, so those I can read off each. The turnover of data from the prior assessor was very, very slow. We didn't get much of the information right away, and it was always partial, so we would have some of the property record cards and some would be missing, or we would have them but no sketches. And so it was a bit challenging to work with that information.
And just to highlight on that, I think it took until June or July to actually obtain all of the property records.
Correct. And that actually
And that
caused,
was still kind of a mess too.
it was a mess. And I think the biggest issue that caused for us was that the prior company had their own website that provided the property record card information for property owners, which is something you should have. And they shut it down May. I think it was in May. And so we had to kind of get a makeshift thing going where we could get that up
Right.
on the website temporarily. It's not going to be what we're going to use going forward, but we had to put something out there if people wanted data on their property. So that was a bit of a detour we weren't expecting, just because they took that down. But again, not a big deal, but, you know, kind of working through it. The conversion I kind of already talked about, that was slow because of that delay in information transfer. I talked about the ownership changes that were not taken care of. Just recently, we've kind of hit, now that we're doing a lot of data entry and we have that data in our software, we are finding a lot of new construction that was, you know, a permit issued in 2021, 2022, where only maybe 5 bits of information were entered on a property. So whether it was residential or commercial, we'd have half of the data and they would just place a value on it. So we're going back to all of those properties. We can't just leave it that way. So we're out there fielding like an additional, I think Scott had counted, we're over 100 that we weren't expecting to need to go to, because they are houses that have been done for 2 years now. And we're going back out to them to make sure that they're sketched right, that they have a photo because they didn't have a photo, and that their valuation is correct, and that information needs to be complete. So
That's a big deal.
it's a huge deal. And I think on the commercial side of things, it wasn't, I would say, not as much missed in terms of like data, but we did find a number of properties already, and I'm only about a third of the way through in terms of valuing those. But just in a third, I have at least 3 properties that were complete as of 2022, but they were not made complete in assessment. So they have a partial assessment on them that is quite substantially lower than what it should be. And it's been that way for 2 years. So there's a number of things that I've seen that are way off. And I know it's going to be maybe a shock to the property owner, but it shouldn't be. I mean, most people have an idea what their property's worth, and it shouldn't have been what it was before. So those commercial ones are a little bit concerning because those are pretty significant. Let's see here. There is a lot of condos in the city, a little bit higher than what we normally see, but because of that, we are going through all of their condo declarations, because the prior assessment data in most cases had no land size, which is unusual. They should have some land, whether it's a % interest or not. And so we are digging back through the county records to find those recorded documents and allocating the appropriate amount of land. And that's taking more time than we would have anticipated. So that's probably another thing that we ran into not expecting. But
Just to interject, did we have usable sketches?
some.
Okay.
Yep, I would say some of them. And it's a fine line what you call usable, because a lot of the sketches that we have are JPEG images. So they are a sketch. They have, I mean, in terms of what the DOR requires, it's acceptable. But we need to resketch them. The way that we do it is we sketch it and it integrates with our software, so we can cross-check and make sure the square footage that we're using in our assessment matches the square footage of that sketch.
I also want to point out that the JPEG sketches are, they're a format, the JPEG sketches are in a format that was used by the assessor prior to the most recent one. The sketches from the most recent one are in a different format. Point to be made there is the usable ones are not the most recent ones. The JPEGs are there, and it's something we can refer to.
Right, it has the dimensions and it has area square footage, but in our eyes, they have to be resketched. So it's something that's going to take time. It's not going to be a fix it right now. And in many cases, when we resketch them, they're the same square footage as what we're using, but it still needs to be done.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think the only thing I had last on here, unless there was something else you wanted to talk about, was just our timeline. So the board did meet on June 5th to adjourn, and their next date to meet is October 2nd. I believe I just talked with Shirley about that. We're not going to be done by that time. So they are scheduled to meet again on the 16th, and I will kind of keep you updated on whether or not that's going to hit or not. You know, I don't know yet. There's a lot left. But yeah, I'm open to any questions if you have any.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, and I'll go last to open this up, because I'm sure there's many questions that are ready to be asked about, not only timeline, but other things that, there was so much misassessment, underassessment, missing records. You didn't get what you needed in a timely fashion. I mean, months and months and months behind. And so there's a lot of challenges. So we'll start with Alderwoman Day.
Sure. I can start with the first few questions I have. I might have more as the discussion goes on. I noticed in the packet that the Director of Administration handed out to us before the meeting, there's an FAQ document at the end.
Yes.
Is this available right now for
Absolutely.
residents?
It was, I think, a week into starting. That was the first thing we posted on the website, was to get a FAQ.
I think you printed it directly from online.
Yep, I did. I pulled it up from, it's on the city's website in multiple places.
Is there any indication in, say, the city newsletter going out that this information is on the city website? I'm trying to figure out how to, if we're truly revaluing all the properties in the city, very few people use our website. So how will people know this is happening, and where can they get this information, and how can they get it the fastest?
Did you also not reach out to residents with letters? letting them-
Anybody that we talk to, either on the phone or in person or at their house or property, it's been brought up, we talk about it, but that only hits so many people. The other thing I would point out, though, is that most residents, if they've been here a few years, are aware that they get a letter every year, because the city has a history of revaluing every single year. The only difference I think you're going to see this year is we are going to take the brunt of some frustration and upset over value changes, because
Not just you.
yeah, and you'll get phone calls. Please send them to us. I always say that. Don't try to answer the questions that you don't have to. That's for us, and we want to talk to every property owner that has a concern. But there's inequities where you might have somebody who went down and somebody who went up in value, or somebody whose value went up a lot. And it shouldn't get to that point, but I think because of the way that it had been done in the past, it created those inequities, and we have to come in and fix it.
And I understand that is going to happen. I just, every year, I think all of us take a fair number of calls from residents who are concerned about the process. And I think there's been a little bit more attention this year rather than other years because of the changeover going on, and because of what seemed to be more than a normal year's worth of, things we've had to go back and, kind of refund people for, overpayments and the whatnot. So I guess this is, just my thought for what it's worth, is if we can somehow make the community as a whole aware that this FAQ is out there and available in a manner that everybody can see it. My next, you kind of answered the timeline question, so I'm just going to kind of reiterate the point. And I know it's a large process and you can't really rush it because you want to do it correct, and I'm all for doing it correct and not rushing the process, but a lot of people, again, get a little bit nervous because, and I know that as you indicate in here, that your assessment going up or going down does not indicate what's going to happen to your tax bill, because the mill rate is the second piece, and that's not calculated until a much later time frame. But with that being said, there are a fair number of people on fixed incomes who don't squirrel away money necessarily. So the longer this process drags out, the less time they have to come up with that extra money, because we're, as a city, not going to move the dates when their payments
Right.
are due, just because the assessment came out late. And with a very large looming referendum that is going to impact hundreds of dollars on everyone's tax bill, potentially if they vote through a referendum, this would be kind of like a double whammy to them. So
Certainly.
just sort of my plea that do it right, do it well, but do it as quickly as possible so everybody has an ability to plan.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yield.
Yes.
Mr. Barber, then Alderman Eichman.
Given the task that you faced, and I've been working through, I can understand it, and I appreciate all you've had to do this. So when are you going to feel confident at some point that we've got the base, it's set to go, we can carry it forward? How much more time do you think you're going to need to bring this into total compliance, if you will, and then total, this is it? We're confident, we're going to go, we're together now.
I think, go ahead.
Actually, I'm going to jump in. Confidence versus comfortable. We'll be comfortable, I think, at that October board review and even prior to that, when we send out notices, right, the timeline that you just talked about. Confident, 2 years, 3 years. Once we get truly, it's kind of a joke, but truly, once we get all of the converted stuff properly done into a correct format with stuff calculating, I think that's when we'll be confident, like truly confident, not comfortable, but we know we've done it right is a long game, right? But the comfortable enough to be able to say, yes, this year is done, that'll be that timeline that she talked about.
And I think to kind of add to that too, when we look at this, we look at those sales first, because that's how we're building these models to produce value. But when we get to a point where I can say, we're looking at this and going, this one is working, this one is working, this one is working, I'm comfortable that our model is working, but what I need time for and what Scott needs time for is to be able to review each property, to look at it, to see how that value came out, to make sure the information is right, because we're taking the information that a prior assessor had and they before them. So it's a lot of review time at this point. But I mean, the short of it is probably about a month and a half is where we've been kind of estimating at this point.
Please
So,
continue to confident.
yeah.
Well, in addition to that, right now, I'm sure there's people that are freaking out when they're hearing 2 to 3 years. To go back to your October timeline, your October line, that's when you believe you'll have a comfortable yet accurate depiction of where you want to be. And that's what
Yep.
we want, is we want an accurate area, and which is going to be consistent. And that's just so we can go off of that base. Alderman Eichmann.
Thank you, Mayor. One question, are you working on site here at City Hall? Are there certain days that you're here that you can meet with residents, or you've been working off-site, or?
We don't work on site here in City Hall, although we do stop in here from time to time if we're working with other departments, because we have done that. We've had to rely on other departments for a lot of information. But by and large, if we're here, we are doing field work. We are at people's properties, we are at homes, we are walking through, we are looking at permit information. There's not a ton of work to be done just sitting at a desk. That kind of comes at the end, and it's less of what we do. So most of the work that we've done so far has been field work.
Thank you.
And usually that kind of ties back to what we'd like to see, because if somebody has a question about their property, we want to go to their house, we want to go to their business, we want to see the building, make sure that our information is right before even discussing anything. It's easier for us to do it that way.
Did you have to pay for prior records from our last assessor?
Pay for them?
Right, or were they just given to you?
No, that's public record.
Right.
I didn't pay for it, no.
I had a constituent that wanted me to clarify that. Also, any correction of mistakes that may have been made in the past, or things that may have not been properly assessed or evaluated, the time that you have to spend on that, making those corrections to many errors, who's paying for that? Obviously, the taxpayers, correct?
I don't understand. Like the hours, you
The
mean?
extra hours that you're putting in to correct the work from the past.
So part of that does come from just the reval. That's just built into the job. Like when we're
Okay.
looking at that, we would correct errors as we go. I know that in the contract, there is a separate section for time and materials. And I think most of that was for conversion, I believe, which I believe there was an amendment to the contract saying that the city was paying for that conversion. And then the remainder is the, I believe, sketching and then some fielding that we had to do. So there is some of that, yes. I'm not sure where we're at total wise. It's not a lot at this point, but we are kind of tracking it, so.
Okay, thank you. For right now, I'll yield.
So just to go back 1 second, Alderman, to Alderwoman's question. So let's say, I get my tax bill and I am just angry and I'm just, I'm rage now and I want my minute for you to explain and I want to set up an appointment. Just go off of and I know there's some in the information, but just go off on how that would work. Like I'm angry and I do what
Yeah.
everybody does and they call the city clerk's office, right? First step for everything.
Which is-
What's the senior lunch to
Yep.
burning permits to everything. And I call Shirley's office and I'm just furious. What's the
Yeah.
process?
Well, I mean, obviously the process is don't call the clerk, but.
Well, they're going to.
They're going, yeah, we certainly get that.
But
We
when's
get
the parade for
calling
next
of-
year? What time does
yeah.
that start? They're
Right,
always-
exactly. And ultimately, what I always say is by the time it gets to us, I mean, our first approach is obviously de-escalate because I want to talk in terms of the assessment, and usually, and I can tell you this just from 16 years of experience, the first thing that comes up is taxes. And I get it. It makes sense. That's what people care about. And to your point, we're getting later in the year. They have less time to adjust for that change in their taxes. And I don't want that any more than they do. But our approach, Scott, myself, anybody else who would answer that call is going to focus on, all right, step one, let's make sure we're talking about the same property, that the information that we have is right. And then I spend a good amount of time just explaining, here's how I arrived at that value. I can tell you from looking at the past assessment, I'm not sure how they defended their value because there isn't a cost printout that makes any sense. There isn't a sales comparison. Those are things like baseline that we do in assessment, which is, here's how I arrived at your value. Here's how it compares to other properties that have sold, so I can show them. I mean, there's physical documents I can put in front of them that say, here's how we arrived at it. But in any case, we will always get property owners that call and they have information maybe we didn't have, or there's something weird about this property and you can't build here or whatever. We take that all into consideration. So if there's something that we need to adjust because we didn't have that information, we come into it very open in that discussion, so.
Okay, so back and track a little bit. So after I call the clerk's office, because I'm just really angry, then I get your number, and then, but your goal and your objective is to actually have a conversation with the property owner, which I think is excellent. And I'm saying these things on purpose because I want people to understand that that was one of the big goals of having you come on board, was that personal communication, personal touch, personal attention, and explanation of how you got to their number. And explain to people how that works. And that was a big thing that I just wanted to get out there.
Well, and it's a good thing, and I didn't use the word, but we try to be educators because I don't expect everybody to know what we do and understand that process. It's not their job. But part of our job and our component of it is to explain that to somebody in a way that makes sense, that's easy to understand. And if I always say this is more so with commercial properties when I'm talking to property owners, but if I can't explain my value to you, then it might not be right. I haven't done my job. So if somebody comes to me and they do a better argument and say, this is what it's worth and this, and they present that information and I can't defend it, well, then I haven't done my job, or I'm missing information. But by and large, that is the point of what we do when we have those conversations, is explain the process to everyone.
Alderman Craig.
Excuse me. Thank you. I just have a couple things. Number one, when you're going through and you're going through to figure out, what's right, what's wrong, and things like that, are we targeting any of the ones with the newest permits first, so that way those can be considered under the net new construction for the city, or is it as you go through the files and getting the property record cards, that's where, as they kind of filter in, that's where you're kind of drawing from?
It's a mix of both. So the new construction stuff, we had to file an estimated report earlier in the year with those estimates, and we have to do the best we can with the information we had, which was not a ton. So I look at what permits were issued for the year, what permits historically were issued, and what kind of that net new construction looks like every year. But as far as which ones we're valuing or fielding first, we're not just doing the new construction first. It's kind of across the map wherever we're working.
Okay. And then that kind of folds into my other question, that as far as we've seen properties that have come forward that you've reassessed and said, this was wildly overvalued and here's what the proper valuation should be. Are we seeing, or rather, are you seeing a lot of properties that are undervalued, and thus we're going to see a lot of people getting, to Alderwoman Day's point of where not expected to see that number come up at the end of the year?
I think nothing that's seriously dramatic. There are a few, and I would say honestly, the biggest, which one?
The ones that we're
The-
were done previously.
Yep. So one of the things that I would kind of touch on, and without getting too detailed on it, is when, in the prior years, when they did revaluations, they do what's like a sales study, and then they figure out what percentage certain properties are at and just apply a percentage to it, which is not, it's not what you're supposed to do. But what that results in is these adjustments were placed on improvements and improvements only, which is not correct because there is definitely appreciation in value to the land as well. So what we're seeing just by and large is an undervaluation of land and maybe an overvaluation of building. So in many cases, I've seen the land go up quite a bit and the building comes down a little bit. And overall, it's maybe a 5% increase. That's the norm. It certainly doesn't mean that there's not exceptions. There's plenty of them, but.
And then my last thing is, I don't know if you heard during citizen comment, we had citizen asking about the noise and things like that, that whether or not that's being taken into consideration. You mentioned something about where sometimes there's, you know, parts of the puzzle that you're not privy to in that regard. Is that something, and it may not even be where it's noise from an externality in that regard, but maybe it's a, you know, I know there was at one point, there was an air scrubber that was, you know, wasn't working properly, and that created issues where that's not going to show up on like a sketch or anything like that.
Sure.
How much of those get kind of folded in, and is that something that, you know, once again, that wouldn't be like on like the door or the house number? How is that something that can be proactively kind of talked about, or should that be something
So-
proactively talked about?
Sales, 100% sales. So when we look at our properties and we're doing that review, a situation like the citizen mentioned earlier would show up in sales. So if I'm looking at a particular area and my model doesn't work there, and say it's coming out too high or it's too low or whatever the case may be, we will typically see that and we'll go, something's up here, and then we can dig into it a little bit, or maybe somebody brings it to our attention. But we have to be able to justify it. So if I've got sales in one area and sales that are in another area, and they're all seeming to be working okay, I can't make an adjustment in one and not the other. And I certainly can't make an adjustment if I don't see it in the sales, because we don't just make arbitrary adjustments. We look at it and go, ooh, our model doesn't work here. It's about 10% too high or 20% too high. We can back it up with sales. If I'm going to make an adjustment, I have to be able to support it. So those kind of things are things that we see when we're reviewing the sales.
Mind you, that's a model that may work, like you kind of mentioned elsewhere. It might be the same model that works a mile away, and you would expect the same house, the same size land to price out the same over here, and that doesn't. There's got to be a reason why. That is different than a model over here, north side of town, let's say northeast side of town. We have a different model for that than the southwest portion of town, right? So you wouldn't expect those to price out the same. Obviously, we would just change the model at that point, but we're talking closer proximity where
Yep.
it works in this smaller area of the neighborhood,
Yep.
as it were, but it doesn't work in this pocket. Why doesn't it work in that pocket?
Because ultimately, our end goal is those assessments should represent what they're selling for,
And since,
period.
And since you're doing it as, you know, kind of a hodgepodge, there's no like, oh, this neighborhood done, this neighborhood is next. It's okay, this property.
No, when we review them, we do look at them by neighborhood.
Okay.
Because we're looking at them in the groups that we've put them in. So the data entry portion and the fielding, that was kind of wherever we needed to be. But when we do our final review, it's by neighborhood,
Okay.
because we're in a similar area and we can kind of get a feel for it.
Gotcha. 'Cause
yeah.
I wasn't sure,
Yeah.
you know, when you mentioned that it was, you know, kind of
Yeah.
all over the place, then that didn't really kind of jive.
And that's it comes to something in here we talked about at condos. We've had a lot of issues with the condo land and stuff like that. We kind of mentioned there's also condo grading potential problems. Doesn't matter so much, but we're right now just kind of putting a flag on it. Hey, this might be wrong, because without looking at all of the condos in a particular association at the same time, it's hard to say this one's wrong and then not change the one right next to it. So I'm just putting a flag on it. You're putting a flag on it. And then we're going to review those individual associations as an example, right? As a group, as a whole, and see how they all should be changed together or not, kind of thing. So that comes back to the hyper-local then example.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Day.
This is going to be really quick. So again, I was just flipping through this document. At the end, there is the, questions that can be directed to, and there's an email address. Can we add a phone number to this document, just so some people aren't comfortable
Absolutely.
emailing?
I think at the time we drafted
have-
this, we didn't have a number.
It's actually at the end. It's in the footer. Yeah, it's in the footer of the document.
How about
It's
that?
really tiny, though. I would
Tiny, and
say we
it's
should probably
actually
do
at the
that.
beginning too. If you go to the
Positions.
second page,
Yep.
where it says regarding citywide evaluation, second paragraph, at the end, it says,
Oh, yeah.
any additional questions to the assessor's office at, or 414-425-1416.
Thank you, because I know that is what I'm going to get. I don't email.
We can also put it in
phone
the
numbers.
header. We can put it in everywhere. We'll just put it all over the place.
And then my last question on this, again, just logistically speaking, so I am Joe Smith, I live at 123 Main Street. I think my assessment is way too high. I call this number. Who am I going to talk to? Am I going to talk to
Generally me. It
somebody,
routes.
the person that did the assessment, or is it somebody that has general knowledge of everything going on?
That's a good question. So unlike a lot of assessment companies, we are a company of 4, basically.
Yeah.
And the 2 of us are the Franklin assessors, right? We're splitting duties, but like the phone number on here, that 414 number, routes to both of us, and I'm usually the one that'll answer, just as divvying work. But it is me, it is her.
And either one of us are equally responsible
Right.
for the assessment and capable. We don't have a team of people answering phones.
Sure.
Right.
And that's a good point. So when we send out notices, we had a little taste of it when we sent out about 400 or 500 letters at one time. We will get people who call and don't get a hold of us right away. It's going to go to voicemail. We'll probably do some sort of a message just to make that clear, like, hey, we are on the line. Leave a message, we'll call back. We did have, I think, 1 or 2 people that I think reached out pretty early on, upset because they couldn't get a hold of us and they were wondering who's in the office and nobody's answering. Well, we were on calls because there's just so many coming in at one time, and there's 2 of us. So that is what it is, and I wouldn't outsource that to anybody else because we're the ones who want to be able to answer those questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's the answer I was looking for, that the person that
Okay.
they're going to get on the other end is somebody that can actually answer the questions that they have, so.
Yep,
Definitely.
Thank you.
absolutely.
Director Brown.
And again, I know that we got some numbers that I'll be talking about later on, and it seemed fairly low. So based on your further evaluation and going through the assessments, is it possible that some of that net new construction wasn't captured this year that may be captured next year?
I mean, it's certainly possible because again, at the time that I had to provide that estimate, I didn't really have anything. So what I usually do when I have to do that, I'm looking at, I scan through all of the permits for the year to kind of see where they're at. And that's not a usable dollar necessarily because what somebody takes out, you may spend $40,000, $50,000 on a basement. It may only add 20,000. So it's not a one-for-one thing. I kind of have to go through that and estimate, and then, right, and then there's, things that are replacement or maintenance that don't impact value. So I had to kind of compile that, and then I also looked at, past years, what was normal, what was typical from year to year, and I think our estimate was pretty close to what it was last year for the most part. And then we did look at the commercial because there's some pretty big ones in there. Some of those we had to estimate on because we didn't have blueprints yet. We hadn't been to the property yet. And that is a guess. So yeah, it certainly could be, but I can't speak to that now at least.
Okay, thank you.
Wouldn't
In closing, I would just ask that we perhaps revisit this same type of venue again. You gave a nice document here. I'm sure council would like to look at that a little more. I'll be in touch with you, but I'd like to
Okay.
see it come again. We'll
Sure.
promise to be on item agenda 1
Yeah,
and, maybe in 2 meetings from now,
sure.
just because this is all going to ramp up. We got the whole budget coming in. We got Director Brown's going to be laying out a lot of things. So I would ask that they come back. Yes, sir.
I do want to point out one thing also, just regarding a question earlier about availability and on premises specifically. When we do open book, we talked about we plan
will
on
be here.
being
Yep.
in City Hall for 3 days, something thereabouts.
Yep.
So we will have a presence at that point.
And probably even more than that, because as we start to get calls for open book, a lot of those are going to result in, hey, let me come out and look at your house. Hey, let me come in and measure that, make sure it's right, which means we're down here.
Right.
Which also adds to another reason why we might not answer right away. But just understand going into that, because there's so much change and so many notices being sent out, and there's 2 of us, we are not as big as the prior company who has a call center. So there's going to be some delay in response, and we'll try to get that message out to property owners so they're aware of it.
And a response is usually not more than 2 days anyway.
Alderman Eichman.
Thanks. And just for the record, for those here and those listening at home, it is not a necessity that you enter a resident's home, correct? That's optional for
Yep.
residents, just so
Yep.
that's out there. Because I
Yep.
know that's one question that we get asked quite a bit from residents, so.
It is
Certainly.
helpful,
Yep.
but we'll definitely,
It is helpful.
especially
We do
if there
always
were
request it.
pictures.
We request it, but it's certainly not required. It's easier for us, certainly, but I've had a number of people send me photos of their kitchen. So, okay, yep, it's remodeled, thank you. That's totally fine as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll be in touch for the next time, maybe 2 meetings from now or 3
Sure.
at the most. And if we just get a motion to receive this and place on file.
So move.
Second.
First and second by Alderman Eichman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
G2, this is Marion X. Federal Emergency Management Agency's floodplain insurance rate maps firm and City of Franklin floodplain ordinance. Good evening, Ms. X.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a presentation to facilitate this conversation. Just give me 1 second to get it running.
I have a pointer too, if you wish. Or not. That is the question.
Okay. Thank you. So this item initially came before the Common Council on July 2nd when I brought forward a council action sheet advising you of this required update to our floodplain ordinance and the maps that go with it. So at that time, I sought direction related to 2 items relevant to the update, 2 areas of possible change for the ordinance. Participation in Act 175, which removes cost-based requirements for non-conforming structures, and for the community rating system, which allows for discounts on flood insurance rates for communities that participate. So that information was incorporated into the draft, and the draft ordinance was published as part of a public hearing process, and the public hearing was held on August 8th at Plan Commission. There were no public comments at that time. The commissioners did inquire about questions from the public. I have not received any questions from the general public about this project, and so none since that time either. So I just want to note that for the record. And then there's a report here, which I'm going to briefly canvass the content of the ordinance in the sense that here is what it's regulating. Here is what has changed from the previous ordinance in the new model, and how we have also revised the model to best reflect Franklin's own natural resource protection standards, which, as many of you know, are somewhat more restrictive than other communities. So we'll just start with what the floodplain is. So the ordinance regulates development in the floodplain. It is something that layers over, it's part of the Unified Development Ordinance, which is our development standards for all land in the city. And we have floodway zoning and flood zoning within our ordinance that is part of that map and zoning. And then this ordinance is currently an attachment to the Unified Development Ordinance, which also layers with it. So the maps are separate from our zoning ordinance, but they are related to it in that they also regulate land use and development standards within the city of Franklin. So in the future UDO, the proposed draft ordinance does incorporate what is before you this evening, or will incorporate it. And in that ordinance, there will be no local floodway zoning. We'll be removing that layer from our own zoning maps so that each property will have regulation standards related to how they're zoned. So if it's a single family property, the property will just look like that on the map, and then the federal rate maps will layer over that. So that's just something to be aware of in terms of what this looks like. So this is a map of the city of Franklin, and it shows all of the floodplain in the city. So the floodplain ordinance regulates all of the land within those federally designated areas. It's the text document, which you received a copy of in your packet, and also the firm panels. So there's smaller, more detailed drawings that FEMA makes available to the public, to surveyors, et cetera, so that they may determine its public data where the floodplain is located on their property. So FEMA completed a public comment period for this in 2022. They drew up the maps and published them for public comment. We are not able to change the maps. So the map before you this evening is a fixed document. There is an appeals process through FEMA if you want to alter something about it. And they completed their public comment for it in 2022. There was an appeal in Franklin, which is why we are 1 year behind other communities in terms of the adoption process for this. And that was the content of the question that Plan Commission asked me was, do we know what that appeal was? And the answer is no. And that person has not reached out to me. So it was resolved by FEMA and they are moving on with the map itself. The text of the ordinance is a model that was drafted with the Department of Natural Resources. So local municipalities implement these floodplain regulations because we're the ones that are issuing permits on the actual properties. So while FEMA and the DNR have their standards that are incorporated into the model and ordinance and must be complied with, since we issue the permit, we regulate the standards, and a lot of that review happens by me in the planning department, but also happens for things like other permitting types throughout the city. So participation in this program allows the residents to get flood insurance. So 144 structures are currently located in the regulatory floodplain, and the insurance amount is about $6.5 million. It's worth noting that there are also often claims outside of the floodplain, so this is a very beneficial program for residents and something that it is possible to opt out of, but this community has not chosen to do that, and I don't recommend doing so. And then, as I touched on earlier, the map of the floodplain overlaps with existing and future natural resource requirements and zoning. So just briefly, I think we all imagine that we know what a floodplain is, but there's a couple of different areas that are regulated. So on any property with a water body on it, you have the normal or ordinary high water mark, the normal water level, and then an area called the floodway. And this is where there is moving water during a flood event. So it contains a current. It's dangerous in that sense that it can sweep things away, move things downstream. We often get questions about storage of materials in floodways. And that is one thing that is prohibited under our ordinance because it could travel downstream. So a lot of the violations that we have are about materials or, vehicles being in those areas when they shouldn't be. And it's because they could go downstream and then increase the possibility of worse and worse flooding upstream. The other area of this is the flood fringe. This is an area where there is standing water, but it isn't moving. So you have the ordinary water level and stream channel, the floodway, and the flood fringe. And one area where Franklin differs from a lot of other communities is that we also do not allow development in the flood fringe. So it is something that through all of these standards, there are ways to get it at a point where you could potentially have a permit to put a structure in the floodplain, but it would have to meet a significant amount of standards. But in the case of Franklin, the flood fringe is regulated in the same way as the floodway. We treat them as the same kind of development area. And that is because it allows us to have a little bit more control over this sort of safety issues that are there. The floodway zoning on most properties also includes that area. So if we're distinguishing between the floodway and the floodplain, the floodway zoning in our own local maps is based on that. A little too much detail. Okay, so here are some examples of maps. Pleasant View Park is actually a project that was set aside by MMSD and by the city of Franklin because of the presence of significant natural resources here, and you can see what's called Zone AE and Zone A. The difference between these two areas is effectively they're part of the regulatory floodway, but one of them has been modeled and the other one has not. So what that means in practical terms is that if you're applying for a permit or working on something, a violation in the flood zones. The area that has been modeled has a hydrologic model that engineers can obtain and work against in order to show the necessary information that they're not increasing base flood elevation, et cetera. But they're effectively regulated the same by our ordinance. There are differences in them in terms of what they're actually measuring. So, and another example, so there's lots of different resources for these maps out there. The previous one was from the surface water data viewer, and then this one also is, but it has a lot more surface water on it. So we did conduct a comparison. I mentioned earlier that the maps have not changed. So the 100-year proposed Zone A and Zone AE are what shown here in red. And that is what's proposed. The current map, which was adopted in 2008, is in blue, and there's no difference between them. In terms of what's changed, and we did make a number of changes. So the model ordinance incorporates some new language. And then also, I took the model ordinance and went through it and made sure that it comports with our local natural resource protection standards. So there were some changes to language for representing that it's for a city, because regulations differ if it's a town, village, or county. And then updates to agree with local standards. As I touched on, we don't allow in development in flood fringe areas. We do not allow campgrounds in any flood hazard area, which is different from a lot of other communities and different from the model. We removed references to resource types that don't exist in this area. The major one is cranberry bogs, but then there's also flood storage areas and Lake Michigan coastline, which is those are areas that are subject to flooding, but not in Franklin. So, and then the text, based on the direction from Common Council, does include the language to enable Act 175. So this legislation allows property owners to make changes up to 50% of the equalized assessed value without, currently the ordinance allows for that to occur. What Act 175 does is allow for property owners to update over and above that, as long as they are following the requirements of the ordinance. The structure will still be considered non-conforming, but they would not be required to remove it depending on the circumstances. So it allows property owners greater flexibility, kind of takes away the 50% rule as we refer to it. So that the current text does enable that. It does not include language to enable the community rating system. Franklin currently is undergoing what's called a community assistance visit. We have a number of violations of floodplain requirements that are we're working through resolving. The council has seen that item before, but until that program is resolved, we will not qualify for the community rating system. So at the time that we do complete that process, I would recommend revisiting this and having a discussion about whether or not the discounted benefit to residents is worth the investment of staff resources and overall just administrative time. I do think it potentially could be worthwhile, but at present we do not qualify. So throughout the ordinance, there's a significantly greater level of detail about the standards of review. So what types of information are required, the level of detail, what has to be included in a document, who has to produce it, that kind of thing. So they make much clearer engineering standards and much clearer expectations about what kinds of material would be included in a permit review process. And then also there's a greater level of detail about the review process itself. So those are the significant additions to the draft ordinance in the model. And I did not change any of that. So the draft before you has already been vetted by the DNR, and it must go back to DNR once you have made a decision about whether or not to adopt it, and go through another publication process. So it went to Plan Commission on August 8th, is before you today. The internal deadline for adoption of the ordinance is September 10th, so we could look at this again if there's something that you have significant questions about. But then DNR will review the adopted ordinance, FEMA will review it, and then we'll arrive at a complete process on October 24th. So it's before you, kind of a little early to allow for all those dependent steps to occur. I provided the text of the draft ordinance, and I'm more than happy to answer general questions or specific questions about the content of the ordinance. But otherwise, I would ask for a decision on whether or not to adopt the ordinance this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Excellent job. Questions? Alderman Barber.
You mentioned that currently there's 134 residents that qualify.
144 structures that are physically in the floodplain.
And is there a list of those structures that's available?
Yes, so GIS produced that list with me. We're in the process of vetting it so that we can start to track nonconformities. That's something we don't have complete information on, but if you're interested, it is available.
And then it's currently they're not available for the reduced insurance until we finalize all this? Is that what I heard you say?
So no, what currently is occurring is that any structure in Franklin is eligible for floodplain insurance. Structures that are non-conforming, we track them, and at a certain point, they must come into conformity with the ordinance. So a structure that's in the floodplain would presumably be non-conforming. Act 175, the language that we included here, would actually make it easier for those structures to become conforming. But just because something is non-conforming doesn't mean it's uninsurable. It just means that we would not issue a permit for that structure today if it were to be applied for today. So, yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Marion. Excellent job. G3, 2025 Mayor's Recommended Budget Challenges. Director Brown. Good evening and welcome. You're gonna want to pull that real close because it's got a lot of important information.
Yes, so the budget process started back in June, roughly the beginning of June, and I had sent out initial emails to all department heads to provide me with information. They had a timeline for capital budget requests, operating budget requests, and I have received all of those back. Now compiling all of that information together has brought some challenges between myself, the mayor, and the director of administration, and so we wanted to bring those forward tonight. I anticipate bringing this forward over the next few meetings leading into the mayor's recommended budget on September 17th, and then moving forward through to the adoption. I'm sure you read some of the challenges that we've faced, but I'd like to touch on them. Most importantly, revenue and expenditures have been one of the biggest issues that the City of Franklin department heads face. Lack of revenues and increasing expenditures has caused a lot of departments to be underfunded, projects not be able to move forward, supplies not being able to be bought. We've continued to maintain a relatively flat budget over the last 5 years while the CPI continues to increase. I believe we saw 12%. I believe that was 2 years ago, but on average, it's been about 4% annually. And so we just haven't been able to maintain that budget for our department heads. Challenge 3, aging infrastructure and equipment. It's clear that the city has underfunded a lot of our equipment replacement, a lot of our capital improvement plan projects. That being said, we have entered into a couple of agreements that will allow the city to move forward on improving some of the aging infrastructure, but it does come at a cost, and so that is a challenge that we have faced and will continue to face moving forward into the future budgets. I'll talk about challenge 1 and 4 kind of together because they coincide with each other. We purposely put this right where it is because of the assessors being here to talk. Coming up with the assessed value of the city is crucial to determining tax rate. And so knowing that annually we receive assessed values and statements of assessment typically in August or September, which help us develop our tax rate, knowing that board of review isn't going to happen until the mid-October is going to cause a challenge in determining what our tax rate is going to be, which then causes a challenge into how we're going to be able to balance the budget with what the levy is. The tax rate in Franklin is the lowest in the county, and that's why I put this in here. I wanted to make this clear. It is in every property tax bill every year. but there is still residents that complain or are concerned about the tax rate and what it's going to be and how it's going to impact their taxes, their assessed values, all of that. So the positive is we have the lowest tax rate in the county, but the downside is due to the lack of growth, it doesn't allow our levy to increase at a controllable rate. So needing to continue to promote growth in the community is something that we face as a challenge, but the upside is we have a lot of undevelopable or developable land that we can continue to grow on. So bringing in large commercial businesses can help increase that drastically. And then the assessments and the levy, it is important to talk about that Wisconsin imposes strict limits on what we can increase property taxes by. We have levy limits that is determined by net new construction and debt service levy. I wanted to say that August 12th, we got our final net new construction number, our county apportionment number, which tells us what our equalized value is for the city, and then our TID values for determining increment. That being said, which I had wanted the assessors to touch base on, our net new construction this year, our value is only 1.58%, which is lower than last year. And equating that into a dollar value into what we can increase taxes by is a very low amount. We're still doing the calculations, but it's looking at only approximately a $300,000 to $350,000 increase in the levy, which makes it really hard to determine what revenues are going to be available to balance a budget with being able to increase some of the expenditures to maintain high levels of service in the city. So I just wanted to touch on those few things again as we move forward. In the next meeting on September 3rd, I will bring forward some further information, some new updates that I can provide. But from now until until September 17th, it's going to be some working challenges that the mayor, the director of administration, and I are going to have to work through with determining what we can produce for a mayor's recommended budget. And then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Keep the information coming.
Yeah, to Alderman Barber's point, that's the plan is to have Director Brown appearing at all the meetings moving forward until the budget's adopted, to make sure that we are all aware of the challenges, we are all aware and have input on what the solutions could be, and that also citizens are hearing and acknowledging or knowing that, yeah, that we've got some serious challenges, and I guess, our goals as electeds is to maintain that high level of service, quality of life expectations that people have when they come to our fine city, and not to compromise that. But that comes with a cost. And unfortunately, we're seeing the challenges in front of you, and I would encourage all of you to dig into this with us because we're all in this together. So we're going to be going with Director Brown every 2 weeks with this, and if there's other questions you have in the meantime, please direct them to her. We're not tasking her with anything, but we're simply asking quick questions and to get how things are going to work. But this is asked her to come as early as possible with this stuff so everybody gets a chance to let it sink in and start to dig in and look for solutions. Alderman Craig?
Thank you. One thing that of note is that you have it split where there's the 3 different school districts on the graph here.
Yes.
With all 3 school districts going to capital referendums this fall, how much does that play into where this all falls? I know the city rate is going to be wildly, as far as a mill rate goes, is going to be different than what Franklin Public Schools, Oak Creek Franklin Public Schools, Whitnall Public Schools kind of put a burden on each individual taxpayer. How does that translate, at least to have clarification for anyone that's just only looks at the total amount due? How does that play as far as what is that mean? They look at their bill and say, well, it went up $400. That means we're going to get new police cruisers, and there should be no talk about whether or not there's money in the budget for another fire station. That's not the case, correct?
No, so the city of Franklin's portion of the tax bill is roughly 25%. So the school districts are the majority of where you may see an increase. Now, we are going to continue to try and keep tax rates as flat as possible. but I'd be happy to. I know we talked about going forward, producing some sort of document that taxpayers can look at to see, maybe even estimate what their tax bill is going to be. But referendums do impact taxes, and the school districts make up the most portion of your taxes. So it's important to note that if you see an increase, reach out to me, I can help you walk through it, but the majority of your tax bill increase is going to be your school districts versus your municipality or some of your other special districts that you may have.
I want to make sure that anyone else that, being a little bit more intimate as far as this stuff goes, that anyone else that just looks just total amount due, and, to the mayor's point of where they're angry, they want to yell at Shirley for, 15 minutes or whatever. Sometimes it isn't Shirley's fault. but- Sometimes. Other times it might be. But if there is, where some of the ire may be directed to, and may not be the city of Franklin that is the number one driver behind a wild increase as far as what is being asked of a property owner in terms of their taxes go. So I just want to make sure that is absolutely clear, that we don't own every dollar that is on the tax bill, that schools take a fair amount of what is being asked out of the total due.
Yes, the city is 25% of your tax bill.
So of every dollar, we get a quarter.
Thank you. One quick comment. So like just a recap of last year, our goal was a 0 increase, and we ended up doing about a 1.1% increase. Still had all the employees get a 3% raise, which was not the norm for almost a decade, I believe. No cut in services. Everything, even with a 1.1, which is very, very respectable, that we were able to provide that level of service that's expected, as well as not only recruiting, but retaining employees. And that's a big challenge, a huge challenge to municipalities. So you still have to be competitive. So we have a lot on our shoulders to get through this, and we'll continue to move forward as we can with as much transparency and openness with everything we're going to come to solutions with. So at this point, if there's nothing, then we'll just make a motion to receive this and place on file.
So move.
Second.
First and second, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you, Director. Excellent job. Gonna get crazy. G4, an ordinance to amend section 15-3.0444 of the Unified Development Ordinance, Plan Development District Number 39, mixed-use business park to allow truck terminals and freight transfer facilities to a special use and revised design standards. Saya Motor Freight Line LLC applicant, 10613 South 27th Street. Mr. Fuchs, good evening and welcome. Mr. Regis too, look at this.
G4, just to know, G4 and G5 are related, both to the Saya Motor Freight Line LLC project. The PDD amendment is to amend the PDD to allow freight transfer facilities as a special use. Currently, that use is prohibited in the PDD. The amendment would also revise PDD 39 design standards to accommodate this use. I'd note that the ordinance is drafted to amend to allow the use in both the gateway and the business park area of the PDD, as it's split in two separate areas with two separate design standards that apply. Staff is recommending denial of the application, primarily considering the vision and intent of the PDD when it was drafted, and continue to feel that that is something that's viable. But I would note, and John, the Economic Development Director, did provide a recommendation of approval, and that is in the staff report for review. Obviously, John can expand on that if he wishes to. The Plan Commission also recommended approval of the PDD amendment, as well as a site plan that would allow for site and building changes. The applicant plans to paint the building, repair a parking lot, add landscaping, some changes like that.
Thank you. I guess I could start, I don't know, before we go into Mr. Regget's. You know, on the plan, at the Plan Commission, and Alderwoman Day will attest to this, I'm sure, hopefully, that there was a wonderful presentation of what this current dilapidated, horrible-looking, vacant FedEx building looks like, and what it's going to look like, and breathing new life into this area, and bringing this whole development up to where the standards of our city should be, and how it looked. I was very impressed. The Plan Commission was very impressed, and it is something that we need to move forward with. People are not standing in line to buy vacant FedEx buildings. They're not. Drive by there, it looks terrible. Looks like a ghost town. Looks it's terrible. So I just know that I fully 100% support this move, along with the Plan Commission as a whole. We need to get this done, move it forward. This is one of those small pockets of our fine city that needs improvement. So I'll leave that for now. Alderwoman Day.
Thank you. Yes, I also am 100% in support of this project. I've spoken with Mr. Randall, the representative for the company, on several occasions. Their presentation, which a good portion of it is in our packet this evening, was very well done. One of the things they specifically brought up was the fact that this is a business that isn't asking anything of us as a city. And in the previous council action sheet we had, and Director Brown brought this up, many new developments want to come here, but they're asking for things from us, which we don't necessarily always have to give. So it's refreshing to see a nationally recognized company that's going to come in and make this site a working site again and not ask for anything from us in return. And the wages that they're offering their staff are livable wages for people in Franklin. So not only is it improving the economic growth for that section of the city by having a business and not a vacant, dilapidated building, but it's also going to put some economic boost in local businesses, perhaps, you know, convenience stores, gas stations, restaurants, that kind of thing, with folks coming to work every day, as well as potentially then deciding to live here as well. So with all that being said, they talked about the gateway piece. I'll only touch on this briefly. The area where this business is going in is not on 27th Street. In fact, you can barely see it from 27th Street. It will be a drastically improved looking building from what it is now. If we think about things that are currently along that corridor on 27th Street, it's not exactly the booming area that we want it to be, and maybe it will be at some point, but I think at some point we have to, if a business wants to come in and they're a win for the community, I don't think we should hold them to a standard that we're never going to meet in that location. Thank you. I yield.
Well stated. Mr. Piccarelli.
So I just have one question on I think there was a traffic study that was done on it with the vehicles there. And so my question is, what was the results of that traffic study in terms of that area? Because I think there's not like a controlled intersection or anything there today. And is there going to be such an increase in traffic that we're going to have to do some sort of improvements at some point, I guess is where I'm
Mr.
going.
Fuchs, any comment on that?
I'm not aware of any recommendations that, you know, any intersection changes, anything like that. I believe the applicant is here as well if they have any additional comments on any recommendations that came out of that.
One point to that, it was a FedEx.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right, yeah.
it was FedEx area. So if the applicant wishes to approach, if not, I mean, we're ready to move on this, but if the applicant wishes to approach and briefly answer any questions, you're up. I mean, I think you did a great job. Why don't we hold off on that? I think to your answer, Mr. Piccarelli, is I don't believe there is a separate traffic study that was completed, because I don't think there was one asked for after the current use was a FedEx building, so I don't think. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, sir, come up here, please, and join us at the large table. And just for the record, state your name and business address for the record.
Yeah, no problem. Attorney Brian Randall of Amundsen Davis, 111 East Kilbourne Avenue in Milwaukee, representing SIA. And my clients are here. Mayor, I was doing my best to bite my tongue and not speak, but I wanted to make sure the record was clear that we actually did do a traffic study. We were not asked to do
Excellent.
one.
Bring it forward.
And we were not asked to do additional road work or anything as a result of that traffic study. But my understanding is the city engineering department has had it on file, has reviewed it. Frankly, one of the reasons we're attracted to the site, we know it will work well, is because of what the mayor said. It had been a trucking terminal before. XPO is nearby. And then the DOT has done constant improvements, I'm sure as the council's aware and a lot of the neighbors, but it's a really well set up site for our use. And we do not need to add improvements, whether funded by the city or otherwise, to function for us. But there is a traffic study on file, and I just want to make sure that the mayor didn't misspeak, because we paid for it, we put it on file, and it does say that we will not cause, and this is important for your constituents, any undue impact in adverse trucking traffic excess vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Alderwoman Day, would you like to make the motion to approve on this?
I will make the motion to approve.
Second. Seconded by Alderman Barber. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Congratulations and welcome. We are very, very excited.
Number 5.
G5, a resolution imposing conditions and restrictions for the approval of special use for a truck terminal and freight transfer facility business with use with the outdoor storage and parking of vehicles, trailers, and equipment upon property located at 10613 South 27th Street, SIA Motor Freight Line LLC applicant, Franklin Tech Center LLC, Delaware LLC property owner, Mr. Fuchs.
So this is the special use then that is now allowed in the PDD that is specific to SIA Freight at this location. And the Plan Commission also recommended approval of this application.
Thank you. Mr. Barber?
Just for the record, and I'm for this right now, but why do we have to have a special use if it was already a freight company? What is?
The staff did have that conversation with the applicant, and going from, and typically it's been past practice, going from something permitted and a use like this to make it a special use, to have that added control and with it rather than being just permitted, because it applies to not just this property, but the amendment applies to all the properties within PD number 39. So staff felt it was best to have a special use, have it as a special use, and the applicant did end up agreeing with that.
Mr. City Attorney?
And with regard to the prior existing use, it did become a non-conforming use when the area was rezoned, but a non-conforming use that goes vacant for a year no longer has the non-conforming use status, and the vacancy went beyond that deadline. That's what happened.
Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman Day, is there a motion?
I make the motion to approve the special use.
Second.
Seconded by Alderwoman Eichmann. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you very much. G6, a resolution approving a partial property tax recession and refund for parcel number 934-0120-000.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. G7, a resolution conditionally approving a preliminary plat for Ridgewood Reserve subdivision, generally located to the north of West Drexel Avenue, east of South Ridgewood Drive, and west of South 76th Street. Creative Homes, Inc., property owner and applicant, Mr. Fuchs.
This is a 9-lot, single-family subdivision. There is one outlot that contains the stormwater management and natural resources. All the lots meet the R6 district minimum lot area and width standards. The staff and the plan commissioner are both recommending approval.
With that being said, I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to adopt.
I'll second.
First and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Mr. Prisbilla, always good to see you, sir. G8, Resolution approving a partial property tax recession and refund for parcel number 759-9054-000. Is there a motion? As stated. We've got a first. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Actually, we'll go with Alderman Craig. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Picarelli, I'm sorry. What's up?
You're talking about G9 or G8?
Eight.
G8.
Okay.
So G8, we've got a first and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none again, I guess we added all those in favor again, just in case there was a question.
We already voted.
I got it, but we're redoing because there was a question that was G8. So it's first and second, and everybody approved it.
Correct.
Unanimous. Motion
Yes.
carries. Thank you. G9, resolution authorizing the execution of a tax-exempt lease purchase agreement and related documents and award the sale for the Johnson Controls Municipal Project. Who's taking this one? Director Brown.
Okay, so back a few months ago, the Common Council approved the Johnson Controls project. In that stated, there were a few different options as to funding the project. I know that we did a budget amendment allowing for the reallocation of some capital projects in the 24 budget, which was roughly $900,000, and that is what is going to be used to fund about a third of the project. The project is a $3 million project. I went ahead and reached out to Johnson Controls to determine what the funding options were. I did put those in here. It was going out to market for a general obligation bond, which we actually just did in July, and we just missed the time frame to add this to that for the TID 9 CarMax project. They also had a tax-exempt lease purchase option, and then the contingent payment funding structure option, which is actually funded right through Johnson Controls themselves. So after reaching out to them, I reached out to our financial advisor, also Quarles and Brady, to determine what some possible solutions were, and made the determination that moving forward with the tax-exempt lease purchase was the best option for us due to missing the extension of the bond on July 16th. Determining what the closing costs would be versus the interest rates that we could get by doing this tax-exempt lease purchase and going out to market with a bank loan. And then determining what the cash flow would be and determining what the capital contributions would be on an annual basis compared to the savings that we would receive from the utilities. So JCI, Johnson Controls, actually prepared the RFP for us and brought it out to, I believe, 7 different banking facilities. They came back with 3 different proposals, which I have given to you. I received the Bank of America proposal on Friday. I believe that was included in your packet. However, the initial proposals that were in your packet were outdated, and so I then emailed you guys the new ones, and then you should have a copy of the Webster Bank and the Huntington Bank proposals at your desk tonight, or at your chair. That being said, I just wanted to point out that the general obligation bond that we took out back in July and closed on August 7th, our interest rate was 3.85%, which equated to about $885,000 in interest over the life of that bond. Here in front of you, the lowest proposal is Bank of America at 3.97%, which is very comparable because the closing costs that were on the general obligation bond were about $100,000. So you're saving $100,000 in closing costs by doing this tax-exempt lease purchase. I would point out that the Bank of America cash flow and the amortization schedule shows that the interest portion is $908,000. So again, we are saving $75,000 in closing costs and interest payments by doing this option. What's important to note here, and I'm actually glad that Bank of America provided this for us because I didn't, but the cash flow that was presented to you guys at the Johnson Controls agreement does show that we will be maintaining about $2.1 million in utility savings over the life of the project. So a $3 million project really only equates to the $900,000 that we have contributed in capital costs over the savings. So it's important to note that it's a very small capital contribution compared to the savings that we will be maintaining over the life. It's a 20-year bond, and I'm just asking to move forward with Bank of America as the bank loan for this tax-exempt lease purchase.
Excellent. Any questions?
So moved.
Mr. Pecorelli.
So I saw in the payment schedules, there's a rebate, I think, in year 3.
Yes.
That's in there, and then it looks like that helps pay down more principal.
Correct.
So is there what's the stipulations on the rebate? Is there any way we're not getting that rebate, essentially?
That is from Johnson Controls. I don't remember I think it was in the initial agreement. I could provide that to you after the fact, but it didn't seem like there was any stipulation as to where we may not receive that rebate.
I saw it was like in year 3.
Yes, yes.
And I'll yield.
Okay. Alderman Day.
Thank you. So it's a little bit tangential, but somewhat related. Do we know of any other programs that we might be able to apply for now that we are, updating our infrastructure to be a little bit more energy efficient and a little bit more green, that would potentially be able to give us some additional funding, grant back, that kind of thing, that might help to, pay this down faster or, go ahead.
Yeah, my understanding is that that had been fully vetted from Johnson Controls or by Johnson Controls, and that's what the whole
Part
project is.
of
Yeah, exactly.
Everything together?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but I mean, certainly if there are funds available, we will do our best to go after them.
Yeah, and I will just state that there was only one energy efficient grant that Johnson Controls did mention to us. However, it came out a little over a year ago, and engineering had already requested that money and already had plans for that, some lighting projects. So that was the only one that isn't included in here.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, every time we had looked at anything, it was already taken.
Alderman Eichmann.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Unless anyone has anything else to add, we've got a motion on the table. I'll make the second.
Motion to go with Bank of America.
That's your
Yeah, I'll
motion.
second that.
That's your second. Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. G10, authorize certain city officials to enter into an agreement with ADP for carrier connections service. This would be Director of Administration. What would you like to enlighten us with?
Well, it's all in here. So basically what I wanted just to highlight is that this is a service provider that we already use and have been using for potentially over a decade. This is the service connections, the carrier connections service rather, is to create a seamless process. Right now we use paper applications for changes. It's really, to be perfectly frank, it's unheard of at this stage in this day and age, really. And so this would be seamless process. It is real time versus filling out a form, returning it, and then having our HR manager go through the process to get it to the various carriers. This is streamlined. It's clean. It's easy. It's essentially the right thing to do, and it is exactly how everyone is running their business.
Thank you. Any further questions? Because there's a motion.
Motion to authorize.
Second.
So a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Item G11, Stafford Rosenblum LLP request for potential conflict of interest informed consent waiver with regard to its representation of the city upon appointments by the city's insurer, currently for Polish Heritage Alliance, Inc. versus City of Franklin, Milwaukee County case number 23-CV-9073, and requested representation of Smith's Property Services LLC upon a zoning violation unrelated to the city representation services matter. Mr. Wazalowski, if you could please turn on his, Kelly? Mr. City Attorney.
With regard to the zoning violation, I reviewed with the planning manager that it's totally unrelated. It involves a single-family property with some alleged business operation being in a single-family residential property. So, as recommended on the action sheet, authorize the mayor and city attorney to execute the informed consent letter.
I'll make the motion.
First and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. G12, a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governing body has jurisdiction or exercise responsibility. Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 sub 1 sub F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons except where par B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, and Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 sub 1 sub G as in George, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is likely to become involved, and to re-enter open session at that same place thereafter to act on such matters discussed therein as it deems appropriate.
Motion to go into closed.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day. Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
6 ayes, no noes, motion carries. We are slowly going into closed session. Yeah, we're gonna come back at, in 5 minutes. 8:12, please, come back, take 5 minutes off. You can slowly creep up. Dan,
Recording in progress.
open it wide open, please. Push it open. It's 9:07 PM, we are back in open session. Is there, there's no motion to be made? Move on to item G13. I'll read it, but I have a thought on it. A motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 1985 sub 1 sub E to deliberate upon the information, terms, and provisions of the wholesale water purchase and sale agreement between Oak Creek and Franklin, the provision of public water supply to the city of Franklin as related to the city, the Franklin Municipal Water Utility and its customers in 2024 and beyond, and the potential negotiation of terms in relation thereto, and the investing in public funds and governmental actions in relation thereto for competitive and bargaining reasons, and to re-enter open session at the same place thereafter to act on such matters discussed therein as it deems appropriate. We don't have to go in if there's no motion. Hearing no motion, motion failed to remain in open session. Is that correct, Counselor?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Duchovny, good evening. Welcome. Just state your name and business address. Yeah, like you're on karaoke, just bring it right in here and your meatloaf.
Am I on?
You are on. Just state your name and business address or local, whatever you wish. And thank you again for coming.
Dan Dukniak. My residence is at 3647 West Forest Hill Avenue in
Thank you.
Franklin.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Dan is here to speak about this because he was instrumental in the negotiation of this contract, and he also serves as a Board of Water Commission member. Hopefully that.
Right, and Mr. City Attorney, and then I'll go.
Here's the short version. You have a draft that's been negotiated with Oak Creek in the council meeting agenda packet. And there are some very minor changes that I discussed with the attorney for Oak Creek, and to which she agreed to one of them. And that's simply with regard to the last provision of the agreement on page 9 in the agenda packet, 11.12, that says entire agreement. As of today, the thought is to add into, at the end of that provision, this agreement shall serve in place of and replace the 1994 agreement, the terms and provisions thereof which are no longer in effect from the effective date of this agreement forward. And the other item that was brought up was through the decades, with filings before the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, et cetera, there have, as well as agreements, including the 1994 agreement with Oak Creek, et cetera, the municipal public water utility or water and sewer utility also either fully participated in matters before the Public Service Commission, but would also execute agreements between the municipalities. So my suggestion was to add a provision, or to have signature provisions also for the Oak Creek Water and Sewer utility, as well as Franklin's and the Board of Water Commissioners to execute the agreement. So in any event, the subject matter was before the Franklin Board of Water Commissioners at a meeting this afternoon. The commission voted to approve the agreement with the two changes I just mentioned. And I did provide a copy of a resolution redraft that is at your place. And all that is added to what the resolution states in the packet is the fact of, in the last new whereas on the first page, the City of Franklin Board of Water Commissioners met today and approved the wholesale water purchase and sale agreement between Oak Creek and Franklin, with a minor text change to the agreement as the change was presented to the council at this meeting, which I just mentioned, and to add a provision for it to be executed by the board's president, and also subject to any technical changes because the final draft between Franklin and Oak Creek simply is not done yet. And then I also added in the be it further resolved at the bottom of the first page of the resolution, in addition to the mayor, the city clerk, and the city attorney being authorized to execute, it notes that the Board of Water Commissioners president is also executing the agreement. And those were the only changes to what's in the meeting agenda packet.
Thank you. And Daniel, I appreciate your patience to show up here tonight and your time and absolutely your efforts throughout this entire journey. And we'll say it as a journey. And now I have a very respected member of the community that spoke today in citizen comment period, Mr. Paul Rotzenberg, that I can't say enough good things about Paul in my time as an alder, and how much knowledge he has and how much he continues to help the city, and really, really wants the best for this community, as do all of us. And, you know, I heard his concerns today, and I know this has been a big deal with why we haven't gone to Milwaukee, why this is a good deal for the city of Franklin, and why, you know, certain compromises were brought forth by Oak Creek to make this a palatable deal long-term. And I know you've come here before and you've discussed it with us. The Board of Water Commissioners, since I've been in office, it's always been a discussion about why it's the better deal to go with Oak Creek long-term. And if you just like to comment before we answer questions.
Sure. I first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come here and talk to you tonight. I appreciate that. I did listen to Paul's comments tonight, and I do have some information for you. I do respect Paul. He was here for a long time. Just so you're aware of my background, I've negotiated 3 of these contracts now. So I know a little bit about water contracts and how they work with different communities, and aware of different intergovernmental agreements. It's one of the things that I do in my day job. So I do know what's happening here, and I do know I want the best for Franklin also. I've been a resident here now for almost 30 years. So my parents live here, my 2 boys my 1 boy lives here, and my mother-in-law lives here. So we're all residents, and I want what's the best for Franklin also. So Paul had a few things that he said. It is a 40-year agreement. He's correct. Franklin has the highest cost water. That's not true. I actually looked tonight before I came here. I looked on the Public Service Commission website. We're actually in the middle of the pack, which is pretty respectable. We're a little behind Oak Creek, which is to be expected. We're wholesale customers of theirs, so we're a little behind them, but we're in the middle of the pack when you compare us to the state. So I wouldn't say that we have the highest rates. I work in Waukesha. We have a little bit higher rates than you do in Franklin, so we do have higher rates here. He talked about a lot of the discussions being in closed session, and I respect that. My response to that is, you guys are all, you are the elected officials. You're representing the citizens here. We can't have these types of negotiations in public. That wouldn't be what's best for the residents that you guys serve. We cannot have those negotiations because we don't want to give each party, want each party to understand what they're negotiating and who they're negotiating against. If I'm negotiating against someone, I don't want them to know what I'm thinking, like they don't want to know what we're thinking. So that's why we have these negotiations in private. And that's why I came here, and we came here before. We had the closed session before when we talked about this. So we were trying to fill you in. The Water Utility Commission has been negotiating in closed session. I respect his wanting to understand everything. But again, that's why we elect our public officials here, so they can represent the people and have their best interests in mind. And that's why you guys are sitting here tonight making this decision. Let's see. March of 2018, we had the joint session, and then, again, I was at the other one. The staff hired consultants and to review all of that information. That was another point that he had made. That was a number of years ago, and that was in 2018. And I would say that a lot of the information that they were analyzing was flawed, because Milwaukee was not going to provide water under the conditions that we reviewed. So we wanted to get water from a different pressure zone with different facilities, trying to gain benefit from what they were showing or what we wanted. And Milwaukee wasn't willing to provide water under those conditions. And they told us that. So we were going to be back at square one with Milwaukee. And so that put us in an awkward and difficult position. So that's, again, that's why I came back here and talked to you before. The other thing, that the same accountants that did the analysis, the financial analysis, are the same accountants that reviewed Exhibit C in the packet tonight. And we incorporated all their comments in Exhibit C. And Exhibit C is what protects the residents of the city of Franklin, because that spells out how rates will be calculated specifically under the terms of this contract. So now there's not going to be questions about what's included and what's not included, how much we're paying for this, how much we're paying for that. It's all spelled out in Exhibit C. It's been reviewed by our financial consultants, and all of their comments have been incorporated, and Jesse has reviewed those comments being incorporated. So that I wanted to just point that out. The other thing is, he asked why we would give up our right to challenge the $30 million project, that we're waiving that. we're not waiving that. If you look on page 5 specifically says under 6.1.2 that Franklin agrees not to intervene in Oak Creek's PSC construction authorization process, right? For the UFR project, as long as it remains substantially similar to the alternative selected by the Oak Creek Board of Public Works and Capital Assets on February 13, 2024. We sat on the committee to look at that and review it and make a recommendation to that board. So we were represented there in that, and we helped them select an alternative, and we agreed to that alternative. In fact, they came to the Board of Water Commissioners and made a presentation to us and showed us about where we were able to review the alternatives, and we were able to see and make a decision, work with Glenn on it. So we were involved in making that decision for that project. So as long as it stays substantially similar to that project, we don't object to that. And that's what we're saying. If it changes, we absolutely, and Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, we absolutely have the right to intervene. So as long as it stays to what we agreed upon, we give up our right. But if it changes, we have every right to go in. And this means nothing moving forward with any other project moving forward. We have every right to intervene moving forward on any project that they put forth. But I think there's a lot of protections in here for us in terms of the communication that was lacking before. They're going to come to us and talk to us about projects that they're going to do. And they're going to make sure that we are aware of them ahead of time. We're going to have annual discussions with them. So I think there's a lot of really good things in this contract. They've also waived part of their part of the pilot payment or tax payment that they pay to the city so that those won't be calculated within our rates for the first 5 years of this contract. That was a huge concession by them.
Big time.
And then the other thing is that the rate of return will be the same between the both communities. So these are huge concessions that they made that they weren't making before. So I stand behind this contract, and I will argue for it. I do not think it would be the right thing to hold it. Oak Creek is voting on it tonight. I think Franklin should vote on it tonight, and I think your vote should be yes. And I'll answer.
Thank you. Questions, Alderman Barber and Alderwoman Day?
I've been part of the process since.
Can we turn his mic on?
Yeah. Long time.
There you go. It's on. It's on. Don't touch.
Okay. I've been part of the process. I understand it. I appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and I appreciate what we have before us tonight. My only concern is that the public is going to get this as not even an announcement. It's just, this is the way it is. And that's where the fallout's going to come for me. I have no problem with going with it, but the public is all of a sudden going to be hit with this. We've come up with agreement, and they're going to say, well, why weren't we told? Why wasn't there anything going on about this? I mean, it's said and done. I appreciate it. What could we do now to mitigate that?
Well, Kelly can answer that.
So Oak Creek just voted on it tonight. We're voting on this. We are meeting with Oak Creek's publicist or public relations specialist on Thursday to talk about a joint announcement for both communities to our constituents.
To me, it's still said and done, and nobody in the city knows about it except us.
Well, hold on. How many years has this been going on? How many years? Oh,
But we have not shared any of the information along the
Well-
way with it. It's always been in closed session, like Paul said. And I respect Paul equally with you. But that, I think that is a concern for me as an alderman, and the fact that I don't know how we can avoid it, but it is a big concern of mine that they know nothing. My constituents know nothing about this.
I mean, this has been out for a long time.
Only the fact that we are negotiating it.
It had been out there for a long time, at least for me. I knew that as a community, we were looking at negotiating with Oak Creek and also Milwaukee. And so, that negotiation has occurred over 6+ years, and now we've come to an agreement with Oak Creek.
we can post the agreement. We can we're going to post everything. I mean, once this is done on our end and done on their end, I mean, Oak Creek's in the same boat as us. I mean, when you're negotiating where you're at in closed session because you're negotiating. And when it's finalized as it was, I mean, I don't know what we would be telling people other than this is our position, maybe. But, I mean, after tonight, we post and put everything out there after, well, maybe tomorrow, depending on when this is adopted. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Alderman. I don't know what else would be changing and how else it would be done.
I don't think
But-
anything needs to be changed. I just think that we need to inform the constituents about what has happened and what the justification is for it, and we need to move on. I mean, I can go along with this tonight, providing that there's something that is going to explain this all to the people as to why it's happened and how it's happened, and the fact that this is the best thing for the community. And that would kind of mitigate the fact that no one's told us anything. There's going to be people that are going to come at us. You know that as well as I do. So how do
We'll be
how do we
meeting.
kind of say, hey, we've arrived at it, that we've had to do it in closed session for negotiation purposes, but this is where we're at, this is how we're going to move forward. We think it's the best deal for the city. That has to get communicated.
Oh, absolutely, it will.
And it will. If you could turn on Courtney's mic. One of the things that, I was just asking for Alderwoman Day's microphone to be turned on. Not sure what's actually. Oh boy, we're in blackout mode. Did you pay the bill? We didn't pay our electric bill?
I've got only one fat finger.
Okay. Yay, I'm on.
But
So-
we have to go back and.
So are we?
I don't know why that thing went dark.
That's
Why
my
is that
only
off?
concern at this
No, either.
point, and I think that we have to.
We should try to get back on.
Right.
Everyone knows that happens when that happened all the time under the former mayor.
Well, it didn't happen
We'll
for
be
long.
accused of the same, especially during this.
I think it was just a brief outage. I don't know where you'd left off.
That's out too. Oh,
But that's a sensor. You mean that one in Hawaii?
So are you showing it on Shirley right now?
It's still occurring. You can still see it. We can't see it, but they can. It's on YouTube right now.
Okay, good.
So the public can see the meeting still and hear it.
That's a sensor.
Thank you.
They can see and hear us. We just can't see us.
Okay,
Um,
I don't know.
I don't know why that would.
So, to Alderman Barber's point, we will put as much as we can, why we did it, how we came here over the last 6 years. And, you know, I think
To me,
that's.
it's like we renegotiated a contract that was existing,
Right,
and we got a better deal.
right,
And so that's what we need to say to people.
right.
We will. I think that's the way to go. And just, you know, other than you and I have been on here the longest, other than obviously counselor, but looking at this whole plan, I mean, I'm going to ask you something, Alderman. I'll put you on the spot because I'm prepared to answer. Have you ever received any complaints about people's water? Like, oh, I hate my water. I wish I could get rid of my water. I mean, I have never. I hear nothing but great things about how much they like.
Only when there was that issue of the bad water that came up a number of years ago.
In cryptos,
Cryptosporidium?
1993 cryptosporidium?
That was
19
91.
That was still a carryover issue for
91,
some
92,
people.
92.
That wasn't
That
Oak Creek, that was Milwaukee.
That was a Milwaukee issue.
Well,
Right,
that was there was
Milwaukee
still
water.
some
Right.
people who thought
Well,
about that.
okay, well, I'll just,
30 some years
I'm only
ago.
gonna talk about the 6 years as I was District 6 and the year plus I'm in here. All I've heard from constituents is how much they like their water. They don't want their water messed with. They enjoy Oak Creek's water, the quality of the water. That's what I'm trying to focus on, is make sure that this is what the people want, they enjoy. I mean, 1993, I wish we could go back to 1993. Gerbodes and all. Who is up next to speak on this, or has comment on this? Alderwoman Day?
So I have a question within the document and then just a observation. On page 6, 6.2, the Capital Improvement Committee, it says Oak Creek will form a capital improvement committee consisting of representatives from Oak Creek and its wholesale water customers. Do we know who from Franklin would be on that committee? Or has that not been discussed yet?
I had, as a commissioner, I had always thought it would be the director of public works or
Okay.
the city engineer at that point.
Is that worth differentiating in here who that is, or just leave it vague for now, and we're just under the understanding that that's who it would be for Franklin?
We don't need to put it,
No.
no, I'm sorry. I should probably.
Yeah, well, I was going to say for a 40-year contract, I think it would be a really unadvisable move to put anybody in there and just, yeah, I mean, and the whole point is that they made significant concessions to allow us to come to the table and have a voice, and that is awesome. This is great
That
news.
is a very important piece of it. I don't know if that was in the last version of this, but to have even a voice at the table, even if it's not like a majority voice, at least somebody can be the squeaky wheel. And then to your point a little bit about Milwaukee, outside of the things that you brought up, there were also things that I remember the last time we met, and that when this document was presented to us the first time, issues with Milwaukee that they had put forth on Franklin that were not specific to water service. There were other avenues and other asks of the city of Milwaukee, of the city of Franklin that had nothing to do with water service, things that the city of Franklin could not do.
Correct.
Which basically made the negotiations with them kind of a non-starter, because outside of the issues that you mentioned with just the water hookup and whatnot that were happening, there were other asks within that contract that we just could not abide by. Am I correct in that statement?
That's correct. They actually said that we were back at square one where we had to follow their ordinance, which required us to have a development plan, a transit plan, and a few other things, but
Everybody
our
off the
development
wells.
plan had not been updated in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. They wanted a comprehensive master plan, and we're outside of the updating time. Additionally, there were asks on affordable housing. There was a transit that they wanted to come through the city. And also there was I believe there was a plan for by the year 2040 to have everybody on city water and off of their wells.
Yeah, so there were many factors on the Milwaukee side that were discussed that made that particular contract something that we just couldn't explore. So now that we can say some of that openly, I just want that out there, that it wasn't just that Milwaukee was disregarded as an option. They basically took themselves out of the running with their asks of us.
Yeah, well,
I guess to Alderman Barber's point, I think, to be honest, and also to the mayor, no, I haven't ever really heard anybody say my water is bad or my water rate is too high. But I think at the end of the day, average Joe citizen is not going to read this document. And even if they tried, they wouldn't understand most of it. I don't even know how much of it I truly understand. But what they are going to ask is, what does this mean to me? What's happening to my water rate? So whatever publication that goes out, that's the question people are going to have. Is my water rate going up? If so, why and by how much? So that's all that anyone cares about. What am I going to pay? So I think if we can address that, that's going to be the predominant question that people have of us, not reading through this for the minutia of the details. They just want to know what they're going to pay.
What I can speak to is the PSC sets our water rate. So we don't have the ability to raise those rates just because.
Arbitrarily.
And I don't think that we have any intention of going to the PSC for a rate increase, probably until after their completion of their project, I would assume.
I think that's the only thing we're really going to hear when this is made public.
Right.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments on this? Mr. Piccarelli, then Alderwoman Eichmann?
I think you're. All right, I'll go. I noticed in here under 11.1, there's a mention of regional water authority. Can you expand on what that is?
It's I can start, and then if you want to finish, it essentially states that we can come to the table and have discussions about potentially creating a regional water authority. So several different regions coming together as the utility.
And this is what would allow us to have ownership in the treatment plant and ownership in the utility itself and have a seat at the table and a meaningful vote. There was no commitment to complete that, but there was an agreement to have those discussions and form that. And I can tell you with trends in the industry and consolidation, those types of discussions will probably be more prevalent as we move forward. So it was important for us to have that language put in the contract.
Okay. Thank you. I thought that was very interesting that was in there, and I do think that's a positive direction to be going in, so thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Alderman Ike?
Thank you. I'll try to keep this brief. For the FAQ sheet for residents, the requirements for Milwaukee as far as the transit, weren't we kind of in a catch-22?
Yes.
Is what I had picked up as far as they would require us to have transit, but then Milwaukee County said we can't provide transit to Franklin, giving us not many options. Also, affordable housing is one thing. It was, and please correct me, City Attorney, Mayor, if I am wrong, it was we needed to provide low-income apartments, which we do not currently have within the city of Franklin. Is that correct?
I think there is a large definition of affordable housing or workman housing that they call it. So I don't know if it's low income or subsidized housing and what those requirements would be.
Okay, thank you. And one last main point that I wanted to make, which is huge cost-wise, is simply the infrastructure. It's here for Oak Creek. The millions and millions of dollars to change that alone.
And what was that initial estimate?
$28 million to create infrastructure to take us to the city of Milwaukee for water. And that was just the infrastructure. Then there was, I just had it and now I lost it. There's no redundancy. We didn't have a redundancy backup system. So if it fails, then we'd have to go back to Oak Creek anyway, where there is redundancy. So there was a number of things that just didn't make sense.
Well, I think from my standpoint, the difficult position for the citizens or for the representatives of Franklin was we were going to spend $30 million on infrastructure to bring water from Milwaukee to Franklin, and in hopes of our bills going down maybe 20 years from now.
Right.
So as you know, I'm trying to have the switch water suppliers for the hopes that maybe my rates will go down 20 years from now. And as a resident that doesn't have an issue with their water, I don't know that that's a big selling point for me. I would rather stick with the known and understand the concessions that they had made and my rates are going to be. I have a known quantity or known commodity in front of me. I'd rather have that than go with the unknown.
Right. Right. And
that was the board's position too.
Right. And I think it's also important to note that while maybe Milwaukee's rates, and I don't even know if this is true, are lower, they do increase every year. So, that's also to take into consideration. But again, we were told flat out by the city of Milwaukee that if we wanted to continue negotiations, we would restart the entire process. And this was 5 or 6 years into this entire process. And what we have here with the agreement is a city that has been providing us water for 30 years, and they are making a substantial commitment to our community, and we are making one to them. And they have made a lot of concessions to treat us as an equal.
And just so you know, I talk about this as someone who negotiated a contract with Milwaukee and signed a contract with Milwaukee to provide water to residents in the community that I work in. So I'm fully aware of what dealing with Milwaukee is, and I'm very happy for our community that we have it the way I work. But in this instance, we're in a community where we've had service with Oak Creek since 1992, I believe. So we've had it for over 30 years, and we have this relationship with them, and I think we have a really good deal. We've really opened up the line of communications, and we brought this in front of you tonight, and I would really strongly encourage you to vote yes.
Any discussions other than that, Mr. City Attorney? What would the motion be for this?
A motion to adopt a resolution authorizing certain officials to execute a wholesale water purchase and sale agreement between Oak Creek and Franklin in the form and content as presented to the Common Council at this meeting, which included some changes to note the approval of the agreement by the Franklin Board of Water Commissioners this afternoon.
So move.
Second. We have a first and a second. This will be a roll call vote.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Sun.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nos, motion carries.
Congratulations.
Thank you for
Thank
all your
you.
diligent
Thank you so much.
hard work.
Appreciate it.
So let's move on to the licensing committee. Who is taking this tonight? Alderwoman Day.
Thank you. License Committee met this evening. I have a slightly updated version than what is in your packet for technical corrections to a few of the names of the operators. Mr. City Attorney, would you like me to indicate those as I go through, or just give you my corrected copy?
When you say corrected, it hasn't changed the basic information to the
Correct.
public in the agenda, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So on the first page, all operators were approved. The second operator listed, Nicole Anderson, just needs to correct her application. On the second page, both operators are approved, with the second individual, Matthew Sarek, needing to come in to correct his application. Which leaves us with the public grant for the Franklin Public Library Foundation. We're still a little bit on the fence about this and would like the opinion of the city attorney one final time about the temporary Class B license to have alcohol served in a government building.
Mr. City Attorney?
Bottom line, did the research, also contacted the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, Metropolitan Milwaukee Area Special Agent, and simply posed the question to her. Bottom line, the answer was yes. And then whether or not, under what circumstances do you have to be licensed? The government does not need a license to serve alcohol in its own buildings. And if the government staff is serving, those servers don't need licenses. If the servers are non-government employees, then they need a temporary operator's license. If the individual or entity selling alcohol in a government building is not the government, but someone who's allowed to do it, that requires, a temporary permit or license as well. And the same is true if then government employees do the serving for the third-party entity, no license is required for the servers. But if they're not city employees or government employees, then they have to be licensed. So that's with regard to the licensing. And my answer is yes, with regard to public grant program being able to fund this. You can get into detail, and it's some kind of fundraising for the public library for operations and potential improvements. And the short version of the People Uniting for the Betterment of Life and Investment in the Community Grant Program, which is the public grant program, the acronym for it. Short version, I mean, and it's within the municipal code, sets forth in detail the entire scenario of that and the background. The short version, and it references the public grant program document, which was also approved at the time of creation of that ordinance. And the short version is, within the community grant program, it states, you know, what is it for? Community events, projects, and gatherings, which in turn support and promote the public purposes of improving the general quality of life, economic growth, increased tourism, recreation, recognition of fine arts, charitable aid, and many others that are both tangible and intangible in order to make the city of Franklin a better place in which to live and work. And my thought is, this request for public grant fits within the purpose of the public grant.
So yes. Short answer.
On both.
Alderwoman Eichman?
Thank you. I think it's very important to go back to what Alderwoman Day started off by. If we approve the applicants as is on what is presented to us tonight, that's not correct. There were, and what Alderwoman Day, correct me, Alderwoman, if I am wrong, was stating is that on 3 applicants presented to us tonight, there is spelling miserrors of the last names of the applicants. So if we approve the operators as is in front of you, that's not correct because the last names, there's errors. So for legality purposes, council, we're approving, I mean, there's huge differences. For example, operator listed on here, the 4th operator down is Roberta Fenning, when it's really supposed to be Roberta Fenig, no N.
Could you just spell that for the record, please?
Sure.
Mr. City Attorney, could you buzz him on?
So that has nothing to do with the public grant.
Correct.
No. Just,
Okay,
as
so
I
there's
said, going
name-
back to what Alderwoman Day initially started off with trying to say.
You have some minor misspellings of names on a public agenda. I dare say that human beings who apply for a license need to show proof of ID. So it can just be corrected, and part of the motion could be, and to note that this one, and state the name and the correction of their legal name.
Perfect. Alderwoman Day?
Yes, so to that end, on page 1, the 4th operator, Roberta Fenig. The correct spelling of her last name is Fennig. And then the second operator from the bottom, Tamari, last name Honsa, Honsa. And on page 2, the first operator, Jacqueline Rijos, Rijos.
Is that it?
Those are the corrections.
Excellent. Is there a second to this?
Second.
It was second, Alderman Eichman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Well done. I as an item. Vouchers and approvals. 3 points. This is a roll call vote. 3 points. City vouchers within any date of August 15, 2024, in the amount of $1,232,902.15. Point 2, payroll dated August 9th, 2024, in the amount of $499.99, and payments of the various payroll deductions in the amount of $266,222.77, plus matching city payments. And point three, estimated payroll dated August 23rd, 2024, in the amount of $473,000, and payments of the various payroll deductions in the amount of $522,000, plus city matching payments. Alderman Hassan?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Barber. Roll call, please.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan. Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye. 6 ayes, no nos, motion carries. Is there a motion to
Motion
adjourn?
To adjourn.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Kelly will slowly creep us off at 9:49 PM. That's all right. You get a Timex.
Recording stopped.
Actually, it's a sound.
Do you have a cell phone?